And
I
then
like red.
it's too expensive for the upkeep.
I find that, I buy it in the box and I usually get 8 weeks out of it and
I
do my
like it.
own thing.
As you're joining in, everybody, we're
talking about hair color.
We're having a little hair conversation. This is the stuff we talk about in the green room. We talk about haircuts and
you think it's all about books, but it's no.
It's all about no. It's about
it's about hair. Oh my gosh, we've got people here. Hi, people.
We got peeps. So and they're joining us with our hair conversations. I love it. Where we're at today. So hi everybody. If you're joining us live, welcome. Let us know in the chat if you want where you're calling in from, because we always like to see where everybody's calling in from. And if you're watching this on YouTube later, we're not going to be live with you on the comments, but you're going to be for a great conversation. So stick with us on that too. Just real quick, I'm Julie Slavinsky. I'm the Director of Events of Warwick's, and we're here with Rachel McMillan and Janelle Ceiseilski. And just while people are getting settled in, I always like to ask, Janelle, where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from North Virginia.
North Virginia.
But in her heart, she's calling in from Scotland.
Always.
One
day, maybe we can do a Zoom from Scotland. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Scotland.
Both of you together.
And I am in Toronto, Canada. Woohoo.
Yep. And Warwick's, if you're not familiar, I think most people are right now, but you never know. You might be new to us. Warwick's is located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. And so, as my sign says there, 1896, we've been around for a while. We got people from Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. So I always love the comments and people letting us know where they're calling in from. It's always fun. And Carol's from La Jolla too. Hi, Carol. And another Pennsylvania. So anyways,
here.
I know, I love it. So anyways, if you're in Carol, speaking of Carol, if you're in the La Jolla area, we would love for you to stop by the store. Janelle and Rachel are going to chat for about 35-ish minutes. And then I'll bring in some questions and answers to you. In the meantime, I know most people are familiar with this, but at the bottom of your screen is where we'd like you to put your questions in. So after they're done chatting or during when they're chatting, if you think of something, go ahead and pop that in the Q&A button. I'll bring those to them. Carol, I stop by every weekend. I love that. And then in the chat, I'm going to put how to order Janelle's book. And like I said, if you're in the area, we'd love for you to stop by, but we can also ship it to you wherever you're at. So I think that's it for my housekeeping stuff. Rachel, we do these so much. Sometimes I forget if I'm saying everything I'm supposed to say.
And last week we did usually these are 7 p.m. my time. We have the odd Saturday, but last week we did one at like 1 p.m. my time. We had
10 in the morning.
USA Today bestseller, Michelle Moran for Maria. But it was like we had a mid-afternoon one. It was exciting.
It was pretty fun doing that. So I'm going to introduce these two wonderful authors, and then I'll go away so they can start chatting and have a great conversation here. And I don't know who did this. Did one of you two do it, or did Harper do it? I love that they tagged this as authors in virtual conversation. I might want to steal that. It was the thing that it was the thing you posted, because I was like,
I made that.
Did you make that, Janelle?
I was trying to think, like, how do I get across it's Zoom?
Right, without having to say Zoom.
Person, right. So I just put that on there.
I know. I was like, oh, that's a really good
steal it. Go ahead. I don't mind.
She's a genius.
That was good. So we have both of these authors in virtual conversation today. So best-selling author Janelle Ceiseilski has a passion for heart-stopping adventure and sweeping love stories while weaving fresh takes into romances of times gone by. When not creating dashing heroes and daring heroines, she can be found dreaming of Scotland, which we hope will be maybe a Zoom together from Scotland sometime, indulging in chocolate of any kind, here too, or watching old black and white movies. She's a member of the Tall Poppy Writers, and as she said, she lives in Virginia, husband, daughter, and a lazy bagel, which I said beagle.
He likes bagels too.
Lazy Beagle. I love it. She's here to talk about her latest book, The Winged Tiara. Do we have that? So we can, there
it is.
And joining her is another one of our favorite author interviewers, Rachel McMillan. Rachel has done dozens of these interviews with us. We so appreciate your time and dedication to uplifting so many authors. She's an amazing author herself, a literary agent, and all-around champion of the industry. We'll find out more about what Rachel's working on later. And one of those I think is with Janelle. So we'll have to
what we do together.
what we do together. So have a great conversation, ladies. We'll see you in a little bit.
Bye,
Thanks
Julie.
so much. Oh, Janelle, it's so exciting to do this.
I know.
One of my very, very, very first ever Warwick's events was for the Ice Swan.
Was it? I don't remember.
Yes.
That's so long ago.
It was so long ago. 3 years ago? Was it Ice Swan 2021? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Janelle had a year where she had a book out in January, I think Beauty Among Ruins. And then they were like, we can't wait any longer. We need all the Janelle all the time. So she had another book out like 6 months later.
6 months later, yeah.
And she was just writing everything. And it's wonderful that everybody's here on the actual chat. But if you're watching on the YouTube later, or you have questions later, I know that you can find Janelle online and she won't mind answering questions for you ever.
No.
And I really, really love the Winged Tiara because I find that it's another Janelle book where it has so much of her personality in it. Janelle is one of the classiest, most fashionable, wonderful, vintage people I know. And it's like you got to pour so much of yourself into this book. You pour yourself into all the books, but I know that this particular 1920s thing is so you. So the Winged Tiara, you've written a wide variety of historical eras, and this time I was excited because we finally get to see your voice in the 1920s, which has so much Janelle catnip, from deco design to fashion. What do you think contributes to our ongoing fascination with the 1920s?
Oh, man, you come out guns blazing, don't you? The 20s, I think because we've never seen a decade like it before. I mean, we've had decades of excess, but you know, this was coming right off the heels of the war where everybody was depressed and so many had died. And during the 20s, they decided, let's just have a party. Let's celebrate that we're living and let's try to move on with life. And, you know, they invented all these cocktails and the women raised their hemlines up and everybody went out dancing. And it's really where the youth started to take over the culture and kind of steer it where they want it to go. And they said, we don't want to look backwards. We want to look forward again. And I like the 20s because, well, I like the music and I love the fashion, although I can't wear that particular fashion. I don't have a straight enough body for it, but I guess I'd have to like do the bandaging thing. But I've always wanted to wear all the, you know, the feathers in the hair and to go out with the cocktails and all that other stuff. So I think it was just a fun, exciting decade that maybe we look back with through rose-colored glasses a little bit. But you know, you watch movies like Gatsby and you're like, man, that's exciting. And I want to be a part of that. And I think that's kind of what drew me to writing it in this decade, because you got to explore all these really dramatic passions that people were indulging in for the very first time.
I love that you mentioned the fashion and your figure, because one of my favorite films is Some Like It Hot, which is set in the 20s.
I have a picture of that in my powder room, actually.
Marilyn Monroe, who is Marilyn Monroe, has this moment where, you know, she's telling one of the fake women in the film that she wished she had the flat figure, and he, dressed as a woman, is just looking at her like, what? Like, look at you. But you know, that straight figure. And that's why I love that film, because even Marilyn Monroe felt out of place with those long lines and silhouettes. You've had the opportunity to play with what I call married romances before, which means that the romantic development happens after the altar, and you love, like I do, the trope of marriage of convenience. You play with that. With Ivy and Jack in your last duology, where they're rediscovering their relationship, and now Esme and Jasper. With this type of romance, you always start at the end. You're always starting when the happily ever after usually fades to black on the screen. And you do this to complicate things. What are the challenges but also the triumphs and fun of writing this particular type of romantic journey that Jasper and Esme have.
So for every book that I write, I try to keep it different. I don't want to write the same romance over and over. And I thought, what would it be like if they started off as married already? What would that look like? Um, but because they get married kind of in a passionate haze, and then she jets out of there the very next morning while he's still sleeping, and then they meet again a couple years later, it's almost as if they're not even married. So it's kind of like they're going through that whole process of getting to know to know each other, and I don't want to say dating, but just that push pull relationship that you normally find through most stories, but they're already married. So it's kind of a twist on it
I
that
love it.
they're feeling each other out, and he's sort of trying to court her, and she's, pushing him away and all this other stuff. So I thought it was just an interesting twist to have that. And then at the very end, they're like, hey, we're actually better together. But look at that, we're already married. How very convenient
I love
it
it.
is.
I love it. And that's not really a spoiler because, like all of your books, the romance is the frame, but it's the history. And in this case, the pacing of that amazing heist and the
Mhm.
fight to get to the tiara that is just so wonderful. And this book, like the Stars duology, is that what it's called?
It's the Jack and Ivy
The
duology.
Jack and Ivy. I'm just like stars in my head. Maybe because I'm so in love. I just see stars.
I know, right?
And like that, we have the setting for some beautiful European locations, Venice, a Bavarian castle. They're so well realized. How do you capture them, even if you haven't been able to necessarily be on site for research for this specific book? Because we're immersed, we feel we're there. Do you have any tips and tricks that take us there?
Well, I was stationed in Germany for 3 years. So a lot of the locations that I write about, I've actually visited before. And I
That's
know you
so cool.
visited because you've traveled Europe quite a bit yourself. So I've been lucky enough to actually walk these streets and visit some of these castles. But many of the places I haven't been able to. I've never been to Venice.
Me neither. And
So
I was just like, oh, it's so pretty in your book.
so I go to Google Images and I look up what it looks like, and I go to the maps and I see where everything is located and stuff. When I was in the military, I was an imagery analyst, so my job was to look at things on the ground and figure out where they were positioned and all this other stuff. So I got really good at studying aerial views and figuring out what they might look like on the ground. And if you're standing here, you can
Wow.
see this and all this other stuff. So that's just how I see things in my mind as I'm writing, and I'll reference the map, and I'll just kind of put myself there and be able to see all of these things. And having been to Europe and many of the surrounding countries, you kind of get a feel for what that country is like, and maybe what the streets feel like, and what it smells like. Like, I think Paris smells very differently than it does in Bavaria. And so
Hmm.
you can put those sensory details in there. And, having traveled there, I'm lucky enough that I can do that. And I know not everybody can, but I think that adds a heightened sense to the writing and when you're reading it too. So I love sensory. I see things as kind of a moving picture in my head, and I just kind of capture them and put them down on paper.
And we travel through your books, and I think it's amazing. Everybody comes to writing through different paths. I've always loved that you had possibly the coolest job ever. A friend of mine writes for Berkeley, and she writes these contemporary retellings of Jane Austen stories. And I asked her once, like, how is your dialogue so amazing and funny? And she studied improv at the Second City. And I was like, sometimes you come from a background that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to infuse a bit of that. And I love that your work in the military taught you how to see things that transpose into what you're doing now. And so many of the stories that you tell and so many of your romantic stories, people always comment on the dialogue and the banter. Um, because there's such chemistry in the words, even if we don't get to see always the physical chemistry, you want to elevate it into the fact that they always have something connecting them. How do you plot out a scene? Do you start with dialogue first, or do you know what beats you need to hit in a certain moment?
No, I never plot out dialogue. I mean, every once in a while, usually when I'm away from my desk, usually it's in the shower. I don't know why things always come to us when we're in the shower, but it does. And I'll just come up with a couple of lines that I think would fit somewhere. And so I'll just write them down real quick and save them for later on. But when I'm writing a scene, I don't have the dialogue already planned out. I kind of have the scene. I know what it looks like and I know where I want it to go. And okay, what do they need to say in here? What do I need to get across? What information am I trying to convey, whether it's actual information or whether it's the stuff that's not being said, you know, if it's the emotional stuff that they're trying to hide. And that's how the dialogue will come to me. Like, what are they saying and what are they not saying at the moment? I find it helps when I'm in the moment to just let that dialogue come naturally.
I love that. And I love the not saying. And you know, Julie mentioned this in your bio, but you are a classic movie buff. And I always think of The Ghost and Mrs. Muir when I think of you, because you love that story. And that's a very dialogue driven story where Rex Harrison and, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name.
Gene Tierney.
Gene Tierney. Yes, Gene Tierney with her amazing smile. It's all about what they don't say in moments. Yes. And it's just so good. This concept itself is fascinating to me. The tiara, the history, the Jasper and Esme's need to get to it. Where did the root of the story come from? What flashed and, you know, lit up the bulb of your mind to be like, this is the one?
Honestly, I needed a breather after writing Jack and Ivy. That story, I love that story, but man, it was so hard. It was just emotionally and physically draining because it's not an easy story to get through. And when I was done with it, I thought, oh, I cannot go through that again. I need something easy and fun and flirty. And what's more flirty than a jewel caper?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when do you have a jewel caper? What decade have I not done yet? Ooh, wouldn't it be really cool if it was set during the 20s? And I think going back to the question you had asked earlier, you know, well, what kind of people do you populate the 20s with? Well, they're probably savvy and flirty and very modern. And so that's how they came about. And I wanted to write something that was, I don't want to say it's frothy, but it's definitely a little more fizzy than
it's fun and it's champagne soaked.
It is. And I got to go all out glamour with it, which is something that I absolutely love doing with my stories. And some you can't do that with, but in this one, I think I will be able to go full tilt with it.
Because you're such a creative, fashionable person. And I did want to call out to your earrings because they are stunning.
Yes.
And they're just so deco. And can you tell us the story and the origin behind those earrings?
So Joy Calloway, who is a Muse author and a fabulous person, she asked me if I would endorse her latest book, which is What These Mountains Remember?
A Marriage of Convenience story.
Yes.
So good.
And so I happily endorsed it for her. And as a thank you gift, she had these earrings made for me and sent them to me.
So I just love it.
And they match the cover of my new book. So I'm wearing them in honor of her.
And we should talk about, I was lucky enough to be part of like Janelle's earlier ideas for this and the titles. And the Winged Tiara was not necessarily the working title. I remember for a long time we called it the Valkyrie book. It was called Valkyrie. Everything was Valkyrie. And just
I still call it the Valkyrie.
Like, so people who are watching, if you're readers, sometimes the titles we have for something in our head are not the titles that end up being what the book is called. And so in my head, I see Winged Tiara, but even in my calendar tonight, when I was like, oh, Warwick's event, Valkyrie, because I just, it's never not been
That's
Valkyrie.
how I refer to it too.
Now,
So
the one exception is odd. Janelle and I were both with our friend Amy Runyon. We wrote a book for Harper Muse last year called The Castle Keepers. And that was kind of what we like, that was in the realm of what we had thought of.
yeah.
We all have always called our upcoming November book that we'll talk about later, The Liberty Scarf. And it is Liberty Scarf. And so, yay, go us.
Go us. We did it.
But it's a seg to this question, which is obviously the fashion, the look, the music of this period is clearly something that you love. Did you learn anything about the Jazz Age or the 20s through the writing of this that perhaps you didn't know before? Because I know you're pretty well versed and well read in this world.
Well, I assumed that the 20s began like right at 1920s. All of a sudden we started listening to jazz music and our hemlines came up and our stockings
And Prohibition was over and boom.
But that's not the case, because in the early 1920s, people were still reeling from the war. You know, people were still on rations, and they just didn't have time yet to progress really. And actually, we see a little bit of that in the Liberty Scarf. People are still kind of stuck in the wartime issue. And it wasn't really until the mid to late 20s is where the vibe of the 1920s Gatsby came into play. That's when the jazz music came out. That's when the term Bright Young Things was coined, I think in 1926. And when all the jazz and the whole scene, it started coming out in the later 20s, which I thought was really interesting that it happened. And then, you know, a couple of years later, we had the crash, and then the Great Depression started. So it was actually pretty short-lived, which I think is sad, but it was so big. I mean, look at the impact that it had on us still to this day. I mean, we're drinking cocktails because they invented them in the 1920s, which they're nothing like the cocktails that we have today. Like, it's mostly gin and syrup and like lime juice, and that was basically it.
And obviously the architecture, right? And it's really, your story starts in 1918. It was through meeting Janelle. I have to tell you, and her, however erroneously, I never associated that Americans were that into World War I history. Obviously for Canadians and British people, because it was such a big 4 years of our lives. We study it in school. It's a huge thing. But you were the first American I think I met who was interested in World War I. And of course, you touch on it in Jack and Ivy. You start the book in 1918 here. We're going to catch up with you in World War I in Britain when we do Liberty Scarf that's coming up in November. It's really fascinating that you're able to bridge the time periods that you're really interested in. And of course, you're writing the 1920s with that hindsight of, yes, I know about the years leading up to this. And I just have to shout out, because I see her in the side here, Jenny Walsh has also written an amazing 20-set duology about Bonnie of Bonnie and Clyde that people should go and look up and buy right now.
Right now.
Actually, Julie, can you look those up? Can you look up Jenny Walsh's, if you're hearing me, from Beyond? Can you look up the Bonnie and Clyde books and put them in? The opening in Paris in 1918 is just so memorable. I love that opening scene.
I love it too.
Did you have that at the beginning? Did you always have that, like, this is the frame, this is what's going to happen?
Yes.
And were you excited? Whoa, they're out of print?
People loved them so much.
Go to the library and make them, find them for you. Sorry, I have misled the entire. That's okay. You can buy Jenny's new book. That's coming out.
She won't mind if you buy the new book.
You can also. We did an event for Unsinkable. You can buy one of her other books in lieu of that. So the opening in Paris is just so memorable. Were you excited to write it? Do you remember the day when you were like, haha, I get to write this scene now?
Yes, it was actually pretty scandalous. I
Ooh.
know. So I had this idea of this woman waking up hungover. She didn't know where she was. She didn't remember anything from the night before. And then she's looking around the hotel room like, how did I even get here? Why is there a man's uniform hanging over there? And why am I wearing a wedding ring? What is happening? And
Like
then
the
she looks
Vegas
over.
episode of Friends where Ross and Rachel, what? We're married
And she looks over and there's this man next to her and she has no recollection of what happened. She's, oh no, I
now.
gotta get out of here. And so she leaves. And I'd never written anything like that. I mean, all of my romance scenes are closed door fade to black. And even though you don't see anything in this scene, it was kind of scandalous that she wakes up
Well,
in
you
bed.
feel this is why we love Janelle. Even though you're not seeing Bridgerton, you know in your mind it's Bridgerton.
Something
Bridgerton's
happened.
like my euphemism for open door sensuality in romances, but it must have been so much fun to write.
It really was because I got to use this voice that I've never used before. Esme is very different from me. She says things that I would never say out loud, even though I would think them. I would never have the guts to actually say them out loud. And she's just so sexy and just and goes after things. And I love that about her. And then being able to write the scene. This is how we're introduced to this woman. So you know immediately who she is and where her mindset is because she leaves. She's terrified of commitment, even to this gorgeous man right here. And I loved being able to write it. And then my editor was like, I really like it, but you're gonna have to tone it down a little bit. I said, well, what's the problem? They're married, but the image of this whole one night stand, it's not a one night stand. They're married. So we had a little back and forth about it. So I had to tone it down. And you got what you got in the book. So
And it really does work. And it's, I often talk to Mimi Matthews, a friend of mine who we all love. And for
I
her,
love Mimi.
it's making like a brush of someone's hand feel like the most emotionally powered thing in the world.
She's fantastic.
And you are a voracious reader of all manner of things. And I wondered what makes the perfect book experience for you? And how influential is that book experience when you are writing your own novels?
I like to be drawn into another world. And so if I close the book and step away for a minute, or if I'm done or something, I want to still be thinking about it. I want it to get my heart racing. I want to think, man, I wish a man would say that to me. I wish I was in that scenario, or, I just, it's something I think that consumes me. And it doesn't happen very often. Very few books have been that level of um, consumption for me. I've had a lot of really good ones, but sometimes there are just those diamonds in there. You're like, oh, that just changes me as a person, and it makes me want different things in my life, or to be a better person, or whatever. So that's something that I really love being able to experience in books. And what was your second question? I just
Oh no, I think you've answered. I think you answer this just by being you. I mean, when we read you, I just have you open up a key to yourself and everything that you love. And that's a compliment, by the way, because it just feels like you're giving us something that is so cinematic and so wonderful and so romantic. And I really love that you got to live a little bit vicariously through
Mhm.
your heroine in this one. It's quite wonderful that you're able to peel back the layers of a period of history, even in its dark and its light, but present it to readers in a way that just keeps like friggin' Jack and Ivy, like
I
roller
know.
coaster. But it's nice to know that a Janelle Ceiseilski story is going to turn out okay.
Yes.
Like Jack was never going to be lost to the darkness forever.
No, her
I think
love brought him back.
and everyone reading again, I've known these stories from their earliest conceptions.
Yes.
When the Jack and Ivy duology was called Buck Winter,
Buck
because
Winter.
Janelle basically, and I don't know anything about the Marvel universe, no offense to anyone who's into that, it's just not something I know, but that it's Bucky Barnes, this is stuff I know through, she wanted to tell the Winter Soldier story.
Yes.
But in a different, so if you're a Marvel fan or Captain America, just go read that duology and you're going to pick up on things that perhaps those uninitiated like myself, but I was like, I gotta know all of this, and Janelle teaches us. And yeah, Bucky, Buck Winter,
Buck
and
Winter.
Valkyrie. And it's just so awesome. And I want people to end up having a chance to ask some questions of Janelle. So my final question for you is what I ask everybody. What are you reading or have read this year or last year or endorsed? What's some books that you love that we should know about?
Well, funny we should be talking about Mimi Matthews because I just finished The Lily of Ludgate.
Oh, Lily of Ludgate Hill?
That one. Yes.
So good, right? Yeah.
All of her stuff is so good. Like she can tell a romance like nobody. It's just so, like you said, a touch of the hand, and you're like, it's the most romantic thing I've ever seen because she really dives into her characters and builds up that tension, which is not easy. That's
No.
somebody who is really good at their craft. Her previous book, the Belle of Belgrave Square, that was actually my favorite out of the
I knew that would be your
group.
favorite because it has everything Janelle would ever love in life.
The Beauty and the Beast retelling of it because he's all scarred and holds himself apart. I love that kind
That's
of
a
a
book
hero.
lover's book. Yeah,
It
Janelle,
is.
oh gosh, and you guys have to read Beauty Among Ruins because it's her take on Beauty and the Beast
I love
in a
that
Scottish
story.
castle.
It might be my favorite. Are we allowed to say that? Are we allowed to have favorites? It might be
I
though.
I always have I think every author has a favorite. And often it's like it's great if readers have different favorites. All books are
Mhm.
special and challenging in their own ways.
Yeah.
But I think that's it's pretty awesome. And Janelle always does so much for the book community. She is always endorsing other people's books and she's always sharing everybody else's books. And she is basically the best person in the world. So I was
You do the
really
same.
well, tonight is Janelle night, and you just got your orange banner on Amazon because
I
it was the
did.
#1 new release in World War I historical fiction. So congratulations on that, and I hope everyone reads The Winged Tiara, and then after that, I hope Hollywood comes calling. And I didn't
Yeah.
have this as a question, but I guess I should ask you, if we were going to cast Jasper and Esme, who would we be looking at?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I don't have. I'm so not up on like
That's
new
okay. So maybe people can
people.
weigh in. You should put it out to
Yes.
Facebook or
I have
Instagram.
pictures of them, but they're on Pinterest.
Okay, so everybody check out Janelle's Pinterest boards because she's a visual person.
I am.
But I have to tell you, I have them in my mind. I can't think of Hollywood counterparts, but the young cool kids seem to know all these new people, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, who are you?
I'm like, oh, well, back in the 40s, they had this act. Like, I can totally
Yeah,
name you any of those people, but
yeah.
new people, I can't.
I love that. Anyway, we'll invite Julie back, and then maybe we can do some questions from other people. But
Okay,
hi, Julie.
you two are cracking me up because I'm the exact same way. And I thought, oh, it's just me. I'm old. I don't know who all these young actors are.
No, I'm always years late to whatever is
Years
the
late
thing.
on that. And it's like, I'll always bring up actors that are like in the 80s and from the
Yep.
70s and 80s. It's like, oh, wouldn't Harrison Ford be really good at that?
Yeah. He's so cute.
Okay, Janelle, you stole Jenny's question. Her question was, this book is so cinematic. If it were a film, who would you cast?
I need to have that one ready to go. I'll try to look up some modern day.
Well, you gotta be careful though, because remember when? Do you guys see? I'm old. You guys are young, but do you remember when Anne Rice was really not happy that Tom Cruise got
Yes, I remember hearing about that.
oh yeah, when they cast Tom Cruise as Lestat for Interview with the Vampire, she would say you got to be careful about who you say you would want and not or not want, I should say.
Right.
Oh, Tom Cruise parachuting. It's like, of course
Into
he
the
was at the
Olympics.
Olympics doing a stunt. Like, of
Only
course he
Tom
was.
Cruise would do that.
Of
Only
course
Tom
he
Cruise.
was.
Of course
Oh
he
my
was.
God. Yeah.
And I'm sorry for throwing Jenny Walsh under the bus.
Oh no, it was hilarious though, because I'm reading the questions like, oh, this is good. They're talking about the movies. Okay, I'll ask this as the next question. I love it. Jenny's been funny. But Rachel, for you, Patricia was on here asking, she wasn't sure, but she remembered that the Castle Keepers is what you all wrote together.
Yeah.
But tell her some of your other books, because she'd like to read some of your other books.
Like Mozart Code. I was supposed to have a novel out this year, but instead I've just been rewriting the one that I've been rewriting for the last 3
And
years.
I've been waiting for it.
It's called Operation Scarlet. And the ironic thing is, it was the story I decided to tell to be a little bit lighter after doing London Restoration and Mozart Code, which are set in post-war. And I just wanted something to just play with a bit after the pandemic and writing these heavy books. And then it's actually,
I did too.
and yet mine has just taken extra time, like so many extra rewrites, because apparently I can't write fun. But if Patricia, I've written many different genres. Contemporary romances. I have a series set in Vienna called the 3/4 Time series. I've written historical mysteries. But if you want to read up on my most recent stuff, Mozart Code and London Restoration are my last two before this. There's some romance in there, and they're both set in locations that I am very passionate about. And there's lots of architecture and music, which is basically my jam. So
it totally is. Then cathedrals.
And cathedrals. And yes, and then Janelle and I and Amy have a book coming out with Harper Muse November the 14th, I think it is. Sometime in November.
I'm having a feeling you all might be here for a little talk.
Yes, we should do that. And it's called The Liberty Scarf. And people, even if you don't, people are figuring out which story is mine, even though they're not separated in the galleys, because they're like, oh, this is Rachel. Like, because it's like, there's
cathedrals, it's Rachel.
Cathedrals. And there's a violinist. But yeah.
So Patricia just downloaded the audio of the Mozart Code.
So
there you go. I love it. But she also has a question for you, Janelle. She wants to know if you're going to continue with Jack and Ivy books, because they're such a cute couple.
Oh, I love them. But no, I think I left them in a good place. I think to bring them back, I don't know. I think they deserve retirement after everything that they've been through. Personally, I like standalone books. That was my first attempt at any kind of a series, and man, it was killer.
Especially because there were rules for Janelle. Like I remember we talked about this because her editor said, no, you cannot have such a massive cliffhanger.
Yes.
You've got
it was going to be a trilogy, and she's like, no. No. So I had to whittle it down, but it was tough writing it. But I prefer standalones because I think most writers will tell you that by the time they get to the end of a story, they are ready to move on. Ready for new people, new adventure.
Well, but also with the thing with the series or the trilogies, what's hard too is that because readers are going to point out things that maybe you have to know your first story so well. Right?
You're like, I wrote it 3 years ago. I don't remember.
And so to put anything in, it's like you make one little slip up and it's like, especially today's world of the internet, it's just like, man, they'll catch on that stuff. Even with like research. So that was a question that I was going to ask you both. What's your favorite and what's your least favorite thing about the research that you do? Janelle, you want to start with that one?
Research is my favorite part of the entire process. I think anybody who writes historicals will probably tell you that because we love history so much. And sometimes we will get so far into the research, we forget that we're supposed to be writing a book. Like, oh, I actually have to go and do work. I can't just learn all these fun facts that we can spit out at random, even if you don't ask us to, but we will. So I love learning all of these things about history and I don't know, wishing things that would go back to maybe a more simpler time. Although I say that again through the rose-colored glasses, things weren't always simple without
I still want a
indoor
washing
plumbing and
machine. Yeah.
yeah, all that stuff. Uh, but my least favorite part about research is having to leave things out.
Mm.
Because one day I spent, I don't know how many hours learning the history of mascara. And I learned all these really cool things about the invention of mascara and the sister and how her eyelashes caught on fire and all this other stuff. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to put all this in the story. And I ended up writing like 2 paragraphs, like big chunky paragraphs. And then my editor, no, nobody cares. Whittle it down to a sentence. And I was heartbroken. So,
Oh,
You
that
can
is because
repurpose
it's
that.
repurpose it. Rachel, what's your favorite and least favorite thing?
For me, honestly, I'm lucky. I do travel a lot for my research. So if I'm writing in London or Vienna or Prague or whatever, I will go and take a notebook and write. And I love that. Again, like Janelle, it's the fact that I probably research, even for Operation Scarlet, like I read 35 different research books. I did the Paris thing. I've been to Rouen writing descriptions, and it's just, you can't fit it all in. So and Julie, you've heard this story. My favorite story of all time is that my editor cut out so much about Christopher Wren in the London Restoration, which is post-war, the rebuilding of his cathedrals and churches. And a UK editor read that book and said, we need someone to write a new accessible biography of Christopher Wren. And I actually got a contract that allows me to use all of the research I had to cut for London Restoration, which I'm working on now, which is so, like, that never happens for authors. So I'm like that one little shiny unicorn moment, but it's heartbreaking. But the one thing I will say is I think readers can tell, even if you don't get to use all of the research line by line, they can sense if you have a really good handle of the period and the place that you're writing, the verisimilitude, the vernacular, the way people speak to each other. I think that comes across even if we can't put everything in.
No question, because and you can sniff out when it's not. I mean, you know, you kind of know when it's like, oh, I'm not shy, because that's usually what sends me down the googly rabbit holes, is when I sniff out. It's like, I'm not so sure about that.
Was your name really Rhonda in 1845?
Thinking
but then the author will be like, no, I found this one obscure manuscript that nobody has ever seen, and there was a Rhonda in it.
Damn it.
It's true.
So Jenny's still on here, and she loves these two wonderful ladies, are great friends.
Aww.
What she would like to know, though, is she doesn't think she knows the origin story of how you two came to meet.
Oh, I'll tell it, because I don't think Rachel remembers. So
I'm sorry. I'm a terrible person.
It involves lipstick. So
mascara, lipstick, we've got.
So I have put off being on social media for as long as I possibly could. I am not I appreciate what social media brings to us, but I'm not a huge fan of it. So I put it off as long as possible.
She knows that there's protection in.
I know stuff.
Right. So when I joined because I was starting to try to build up my writer network and all this other stuff. And I said, who are some people that I should be following? And somebody said, you need to follow Rachel McMillan, because she is a writer. She has a lot of really good industry stuff. And I was like, okay. So I looked her up, and what you had posted that day was you had just got a new red lipstick. And I think you had a picture of like a leopard hat or something leopard. And I made a comment about your red lipstick. And then you replied, and then I replied back, and then you replied. I was like, she likes me, so I kept replying. And then I stalked you, and then somehow we became friends.
And Janelle sent me this beautiful vintage lipstick, which was a replica of one of the lipstick colors that was available in World War II. It's gorgeous.
It's from Besame, which is actually a company in California. I don't remember what city, but it's this tiny little company, and they recreate vintage
Isn't
makeup.
that fantastic?
But they only the red. But they, if I'm remembering, Janelle, most of them are reds too, right? They're like,
Most of them are reds.
yes, they've
So
really
the one
gone
that I'm
and done.
wearing is from the 1920s, and I think it's their
Wow.
original, and they use the same formula with, quality ingredients from today, but they're each matched to formulas from different decades that the different decades actually use. So they are time period appropriate.
Yeah,
So,
I love it.
It's so cool. No, and Janelle and I have known each other now for a long time, and we actually talk every single freaking day.
every day.
And it's really wonderful because I have such respect for her as an author. There's so much that she does that I read her books and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just learned so much about the art and the craft, and she's just a brilliant person. So.
Well, both of you are. I'll you really both. And Janelle for sure. Carol, I'm dying to know. You said Warwick's needs to stock it. Are you saying we need to stock the lipstick?
I think that's a good idea, Julie. You need to branch out.
Branch out. But if we could tie it into a book, if it had a book title, maybe it would be something we could bring.
Package them
I'm
together.
going to start writing it into books. I'm just going to put Besame in the books, and maybe they'll give us an endorsement.
Oh, I love it.
Hey, Dan Brown got paid by Nestle to put Nestle into the Da Vinci Code. So
there you go.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Well, speaking of social media, we're going to wrap up here. We're running out of time here a little bit. So speaking of social media and how you two met, Janelle, for people that maybe don't know or don't follow you, where's the best place to send them to catch up on what you're up to?
My website. So it's janelleceiseilski.com. It's got all of my book information. You can sign up for my newsletter, which I send out once a month with just important stuff like giveaways and events and whatnot. And it has all of my social media connections on there. Easiest place.
Perfect. And Rachel, for you?
My website's just boring. So you can find me. I'm Rach K. Mick pretty much everywhere. RACHKMC. I'm active on Twitter because I like to help the writing community. I also show people what I'm reading on Instagram. And in both places, I just complain about how I can't finish this one book I've been editing for 18,000 years. So yeah, join me. It will come out. And I will be here at Warwick's finally talking about it. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I'm imagining, well, Janelle, all the best to you with the Winged Tiara and continued flying success with that. And I'm imagining we'll see the both of you maybe sometime in, when's the book coming out? November?
So yeah, we should
we should probably get something on the calendar.
And Amy Runyon should be here in a bit with Christy Woods and Harvey because they're doing Mademoiselle.
Yeah, she's coming in a couple weeks. I think we've got her.
Is coming out, and Julie, you and I have a few coming up too.
Just a few.
Yeah,
just a few. Hey, and if you don't follow Warwick's, follow us on Instagram as well. We're Warwick's Books, or just go to our website and you can see what's happening with all our calendar and stuff. So. Another great one, you guys. Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.
Ladies,
bye.
And thank you, everybody, for being here. And we'll see you at the next one. Bye. Bye.